Do you love knowing what the latest trends are? What's really hot and in right now, what everybody's loving? Trends are something that can be really interesting to see because it can help us gauge what people are really interested in at the moment, the general sentiment of the moment, and it can help direct us in different ways when we're creating things. You might not necessarily want to make something that's completely on trend. Trends can help us get an idea of, the way people are thinking right now and the things that they're looking for and wanting. So you might not create something that's exactly what a particular trend is, but you might look into that trend a bit further and think, well, how can I apply that in a way that, suits what I'm trying to create, suits my own style, my own brand, whatever you're doing. Take some of the current sentiment and the things that people are after at the moment and weaving that into it so that it really appeals. Are you somebody that loves to know what the latest trends are, what's hot right now, what everybody is really into and loving, so that you can then apply that into what you're creating or what you're buying and what you're putting together and curating, because you know that that's what people love right now and it's something exciting because it's something new and it's the hot new trend. Trends can be great for getting an idea of the sentiment at the moment, what people are into, the direction things are heading and how people are feeling and the way things are going in the world. You might not necessarily want to create a completely on-trend thing, but trends can help you get an idea of the way things are going and can help direct your designs in different ways. So you might still stick to your own style, but you might take certain elements of what's trending at the moment to make it a little bit more fresh and appeal to what people are after at the moment. So if you're ready, let's dive into the 2022 graphic design trends. I'm Tabitha and I'm a brand design educator, and I love to empower creatives to be able to create their own branding and graphics and to really understand how branding and graphic design work. Now, before I dive into the trends for 2022, I like to add a bit of a disclaimer, because when it comes to trends, you need to tread carefully. You don't want to be just chasing trends all the time and only ever creating things that are on trend right now. When it comes to your branding, trends are not the most important thing. The most important thing when it comes to branding is what you're communicating and having a brand that's a little bit more timeless so that you're not having to constantly change it, but it's going to last long term. But we can still use trends in other ways. So it's important to keep that in mind, that you're not just chasing trends all the time, but you're just aware of the trends so that when there is times where you can apply it or you can add little bits of it, you're aware of what's going on right now. And it just helps you become a better graphic designer, creating your own designs, because you're aware of what people are wanting right now. And you can think about how you might be able to adapt or use some of that in what you create. Now, when it comes to trend spotting, basically what I do is sort of have a look at the general sentiment at the moment, how people are feeling, what people are after, as well as looking at the designs that are out there right now and what is repeating, what are we seeing over and over again, what side of designs just keep showing up all the time, and obviously starting to gain momentum and become a trend. I also like to look at trend reports beyond the graphic design world, so looking at current trends for things like fashion and interior design, other design worlds, to see what's going on in those areas, because they're obviously going to overlap in some ways. And so being aware of those sort of trends can also help us to get an idea of how that might overlap in the graphic design world. All right, so let's look at some trends. So the first trend for 2022 is Wavy Art Nouveau curvy inspired type. So we've got typography that has a real curviness to it. So here are some examples. As you can see, everything is really curvy and wavy. It feels like it's maybe floating on water. We're basically avoiding really sharp, edgy lines and shapes. We're going for something that feels a lot more soft and organic and just floaty. So the next trend for 2022 is retro vibes. So with everything that's been going on for the last 2 years, people are feeling very nostalgic. We're looking at the past and thinking, I wish things could be like that again. And we're just bringing up things from the past and we're just reminiscing about old times. So retro inspired things are really huge at the moment. Now, I've noticed inspiration coming from anything from between the 60s all the way to the early 2000s. So we're seeing things that, those more 60s, 70s kind of look, but also things that have those 90s and early 2000s sort of Y2K feel to them. So we're definitely looking at a wide range of things. People haven't just narrowed down on just one era this time. It's just a lot of reminiscing and retro feeling. And I think too with this, there's an element of comfort and familiarity. With the world constantly changing, things are constantly being thrown up at us, we're just like, what is next? I think we like to feel like there's some sort of familiarity and comfort. So I think that's another reason why these retro vintage looks are really in, and I think they're probably going to stay around for a while everything is going on and people are just feeling a lot of uncertainty. They want that familiarity and, you know, nostalgia with those retro looks. And our next trend is subtle noise and texture. So last year we were seeing a lot of gradients. People were playing around with a lot of color gradients and things like that. And now we're seeing a lot more noise and texture being put in. So backgrounds are using a lot more texture, a lot more noise. It sort of adds a little bit more retroness to it. And it also adds a bit of a tactile element to it. It doesn't feel quite so completely digital, but you know, there's a slight element of real worldness to it. And I think it ties into the sentiment people are feeling again, that people want to have things that feel like they're a little bit old and retro, and also things that feel a bit more real, because we're on the computer so much, we're in this digital space all the time, and so having things that look a bit more real, like, you know, things like paper textures or just things that look like they're a bit worn and old, it just adds this extra element that feels a little less digital, robotic, and lacking that character. Now when it comes to color, so the colors that I'm seeing really trending at the moment are really bright poppy colors and pastel bright colors. It's all about lifting our mood and raising our spirits. We want to feel happy and joyful, and using like these dopamine boosting colors so that it just feels so much more fun and alive, which means that trend of neutral colors all the time is fading out. People want more color. They want to feel some joy out of things, and so by putting a bit more of that joy into your designs, then it's going to make people feel a lot more happy and alive, and that's what they really want. So when it comes to this trend, this is a trend that's very easy to apply to your own branding. Even if your brand colors are very neutral, think about ways that you could just add small pops of color. It doesn't have to be over the top, but little things that add just that little bit of joy to your design. So you can do this in all sorts of ways. You can really go all out, lots of color, or just add those small little pops of color. So next up is patterns. So what I'm seeing is a lot of checks and swirls and organic shapes. So last year we started to see the check pattern really coming in and being very popular, and I think we're taking that a little bit further, and we're also adding a lot more organic shapes and patterns too. So this sort of links in with the typography, the wavy fonts, and all that organic typography. We're also playing that out in the patterns as well. So we're having really organic, wavy patterns, swirls, things like that. And then the check pattern that's really popular, which is a very retro style pattern that's coming from those retro vibes, is then also being applied in a more wavy kind of way too. This again is a trend that you can easily apply in your own way, in your own style, adding any kind of organic elements and shapes to patterns that you're putting in your designs. So you don't necessarily have to be using that check pattern if that doesn't suit your branding, but you can use other sort of organic patterns. You could be using swirls or, you know, organic lines and shapes, anything that's just soft. Rather than having really harsh, sharp type patterns, we're thinking things that are a lot more soft and flowy. Now again, along the lines of organic shapes and lines, Henri Matisse style is very popular at the moment too. So Henri Matisse was an artist. He had a particular style that was based on creating paper cutouts to create designs, and that kind of style is very popular at the moment. As you can see, it's just another example of how you can think about how you can create organic shapes, or even start to create the shapes of figures, or maybe create different icons and graphics that just have this almost like paper cutout feel to them. Now the next trend, we're going back to a bit of typography. So we've talked about the curviness, we've talked about those retro vibes, and we've talked about that people don't just want nostalgia, but they also want bright poppiness, fun, and sort of uplifting things. And that all plays into bubble type. So bubble typography is very popular, and it sort of plays on a lot of those things. It's soft, round, organic, playful, retro, and so you're probably going to see a lot more of this being used. Plenty of different ways you can apply this trend. You can do it in slightly more sophisticated ways, or you can do it in really cutesy, fun ways. So there's lots of different ways you can apply that trend. Now our next trend is inclusive design. So this isn't so much a particular visual style, but more a visual direction. People are starting to think more about inclusivity when it comes to their designs. So this can be things like making sure that when you create any kind of illustrations or imagery, that you're being more inclusive, thinking beyond just what you look like as their creator, but who is my audience? Who's going to be buying from me, and what do they look like? What kind of struggles or differences might they have, and how can I represent them more so they feel included? And you can do this in a lot of different ways. It's not just the visual elements, but also thinking how to make it more inclusive in terms of it being easy to read and things like that. So really getting to know your audience, knowing who is in your audience, and how you can make sure that everyone in your audience feels included and feels like what you're creating is for them. So when it comes to this trend, you may want to do a bit of research, you may want to learn a bit more about your audience and learn a bit more about inclusive design and how you might be able to apply that to your own design work. Now our final trend. Now this trend is one that I've only seen a little bit. I haven't seen it in a huge amount, but I noticed that Pinterest trends were saying that ancient Greece was going to be a trending topic. And I thought about, well, how's that going to play out in the graphic design world? So here's a few examples of what I've come across. Now I think this trend is coming into play with a little bit of feeling of luxury and elegance. So that was the graphic design trends for 2022. I would love to know your thoughts if you think that there's any other trends that I might have missed. And if there's any particular trends that you're really excited about that you want to apply into your own branding or into your own graphics. And I can't wait to teach you more about branding and graphic design in 2022. And if you want to come on the journey and start learning more from me so that you can up-level your graphics, up-level your branding, then make sure you subscribe to this channel and I will talk to you next time.